All right, everyone, I'm going to get us started. I am Dr. Yolanda Evans, the division head for adolescent medicine, and really excited to be here to welcome everyone to our annual Dr. Robert W. Deisher Pediatric Provider Grand Rounds. So, a little bit about Dr. Deisher and why we've devoted a talk in his memory. Dr. Deisher was really an innovator and passionate clinician who was devoted to helping adolescents. He started really adolescent health here in the Seattle area and focused on youth who were homeless or housing insecure, runaways, alienated, neglected, or involved in sexual exploitation or incarcerated. Dr. Deisher was raised in rural Illinois in a town of only 60 people, and he attended a one-room schoolhouse. He originally wanted to become a teacher, but decided to pursue medicine during World War II. He trained in St. Louis, where he met his wife, who was also a pediatrician, and after serving in the Korean War, joined the faculty here at the University of Washington in 1949. His list of accomplishments is very, very vast. In the 1950s, he was worried that pediatric residents were receiving most of their training in hospitals, not community settings. So he obtained a grant to establish a clinic for well child care that included an interdisciplinary team of medicine, nursing, social work, and dentistry. In the 1960s, he was instrumental in creating what is now known as the UW Center on Human Development and Disability for children with developmental delay. And at the time proposed that school allow children with developmental disabilities to attend school. This was during a time where youth who had an IQ under 70 were not allowed to attend public schools. In 1973, he started the Pioneer Square Youth Clinic to provide free medical services to homeless and housing insecure teens and young adults. And he also sought private and government funding for social services for youth who identified as LGBTQ and opened one of the first counseling centers for sexual minorities in Seattle. And at the young age of 75, he created programs for adolescent females who were homeless and pregnant, securing a nurse and social worker to do street outreach. He was a tireless advocate for adolescents and youth and a committed teacher and mentor who influenced the generations that followed him. So for our speaker today, I'd like to welcome Dr. Jason Kilmer, who is a professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences here at the University of Washington. His research focus is primarily on the development, implementation, and evaluation of brief interventions and preventions to reduce alcohol and other drug-related harms amongst college-age students and young adults. Professionally, he has more than 20 years of experience conducting research on substance abuse etiology and prevention in high school students, college students, and young adults. Dr. Kilmer has a strong interest in in efforts to bridge the gap between science and practice, and includes ways to bring empirically supported approaches to scale. He always appreciates the opportunity to teach, train, and present. So I'm very excited to turn things over to Dr. Jason Kilmer.
Thank you so very much. Thank you for the honor of presenting today. I hear about Dr. Deisher's accomplishments and certainly don't belong even in the same sentence, let alone this event. I'm very, very, very honored. The title of my presentation is Wishful Drinking, certainly a song title that even focuses on alcohol, but today, consistent with the objectives, I'm going to be talking about norms, trends, and opportunity for substance use prevention, mainly alcohol and cannabis use, with adolescents and young adults. As you heard, my main area of expertise is working with college students, and so my hat's off to all of you that work with middle school students, high school students, and so on. But I would fear the person that claims they have all the answers. That's definitely not me, but I'll do what I can to deliver on those objectives and on this title. Big thanks to everyone involved in having me do this. I'm normally would have driven up and happily been there in person. I'm in Naperville, Illinois. Contain your jealousy, because I'm presenting at a conference later today, but I was given the opportunity to join virtually, so I'm really, really grateful for that. My colleagues are really glad that I'm doing this because I get to quit talking about it. I've been telling them how honored and excited I am to do this, and I've been saying I really want to focus on the overlap of substance use and health and mental health. And one of my colleagues said, "Oh, that's a Venn diagram." And I'm like, "Okay." He goes, "No, it is. It's a Venn diagram." And then we moved to the very important conversation. Why is it called a Venn diagram? And we learned it's called a Venn diagram because of this fella, John Venn, who invented the Venn diagram. The Venn diagram, of course, has the idea that you have everything with one characteristic or concept, everything with another characteristic or concept, and then the overlap is what makes it the Venn diagram. With no disrespect to John Venn and his contributions, don't you feel like any one of us could have come up with this? I feel like John Venn was sitting around in his residence hall with his friends in the 1800s playing video games. It was PlayStation 1 back then. And one of them was like, I love ham sandwiches. And the other one said, I love cheese sandwiches. And the third one said, well, I love ham and cheese sandwiches. And there's that fourth friend who's always really quiet, but when they talk, they say really deep stuff. And that fourth friend said, well, how many people like ham and cheese, but not both? And John Venn pulled out a protractor and he was like, get ready, fellas. And he started drawing circles, and the rest is history. I make fun of this. He's revered on his home campus in Cambridge. They have a stained glass window dedicated to the concept of the Venn diagram. On campus, there's a space honoring his contributions to the world. Mathematicians, philosophers, and Anglican priests. People with a really strong beard game, which we can all agree, come on. And the overlap is John Venn. And I thought, well, how can I make fun of the Venn diagram if I can't make my own? So I made 3 Venn diagrams as we ease into today's topic. Here are famous rivers in North America. These are topics sung about by the greatest band of all time, Duran Duran. And this is Rio. I was at the Seattle Art Museum, and I stood in front of this statue far longer than a person should. I'm like, there's got to be a way to make this statue funny. So I tried to make it funny by taking its nose, which I thought was hilarious. Turns out no one thought it was funny, except for one 7-year-old kid who followed us around the rest of the day. The guard told me I had to put the nose back. And I was like, wait, what? But here's no nose, this is nose. And then, of course, the overlap is I got your nose. Sometimes in Venn diagrams, there's no overlap at all. As a lifelong resident of Washington State, my favorite animal in our state is Sasquatch. If I see a Bigfoot, I will always pull over and take a picture with that Bigfoot. So to show you a Venn diagram with no overlap, here are people who don't believe in Bigfoot, and these are people I'd be delighted to hang out with. So for today's topic, it's this. It's decisions made by an adolescent, by a young adult, by a college student, to either drink or not drink, to either sorry, I'm getting all these messages from WebEx. I'm just going to shut those down. I don't know how to shut them down. WebEx is taking over right now. I'm getting lots of pop-ups about special effects on WebEx. But, yep, now I can't move anything. The decisions made to use or not use a substance absolutely impact health, mental health, well-being, and academic outcomes. In the next 40 minutes, I'm going to try and make the case related to today's topic. When I thought of the concept of wishful drinking, and certainly that's a play on the concept of wishful thinking, I think oftentimes we will hear from the very people we're working with, well, the reason I use weed is blank. And they're looking for an outcome. There's a motive, it's an expectancy. If someone says the reason I drink alcohol is because it makes me more funny, more outgoing, they're looking for an outcome. They're looking for an expectancy. And I do want to say part of the original title included norms. Most kids aren't drinking. My friend and colleague, Dr. Jeff Linkenbach, with the Montana Institute, always talks about the importance of balancing hope and concern. It's concerning that 12.9% of 8th graders say that they drank at least once in the past year. It's hopeful that the flip side, 87.1%, haven't. These are the hot off the press data from the Monitoring the Future study at the University of Michigan. We play them on Saturday. Go Huskies. You can see that no matter what the age group is, most kids aren't using. Past year use for 8th graders is 13%, 10th graders 26%, 12th graders is 42%. Among past month use, which we used to look at current behavior, it's 5% of 8th graders, 11% of 10th graders, 22% of 12th graders. You may hear from the kids you work with, well, don't worry about me because everyone drinks. That's a misperceived norm. And the more people believe everyone engages in a behavior, the more likely they are to do it themselves, even initiate use, and certainly keep that use continuing. Cannabis use, it's also the case, most aren't using. I'll again balance hope and concern. It's concerning that about a quarter of 12th graders say they've used cannabis at least once in the past year. It's very, very hopeful that 3/4 don't. So you want to listen to, is there that perception that you're asking me to make a change, but everyone else does it? They really, really don't. And being able to correct a misperceived norm can lead to impacting people's own behavior. I work with college students, and the data from the Monitoring the Future study on college students shows that 71.5% of students report any alcohol use. To me, I think there's two really important conclusions to draw from that. And one is the flip side: 28.5% do not drink. Whether they're students in recovery, students that have abstained their whole life, students that have tried alcohol, but it's been more than 12 months, it's important for them to know they're not alone and to feel supported in the decision to not drink. The other thing to conclude is 71.5% of students aren't over 21. So we do have some underage students drinking. Past month use is down to 52%. When you ask about heavy episodic or binge drinking, 5 drinks in a row at least once in the past 2 weeks, that's 22.8% of students. So what do most college students do? The flip side: 77.2% either don't drink at all, or if they make the choice to drink, have 1, 2, 3, or at the most 4. I hope it's clear why I'm sharing this. It's important to get a sense of, what are they telling you about why they do what they do? Is it because everyone drinks that way? There's 4.7% who have 10 or more drinks in a row at least once in the past 2 weeks, or what they call high intensity drinking. Cannabis use, they asked the question 2 different ways this year, and that led to a range of answers. Past year use is 35 to 40%. In Washington, I'm principal investigator of Washington's Young Adult Health Survey. We've been collecting data on 18 to 25-year-olds annually. We're in our 12th year of data collection since before cannabis retail stores opened. Our rates are a little higher. We're in the upper 40s, much like the weather this morning. But it's still the case that most young adults aren't using. Past month use, 22 to 26%, and there's a handful, 4, 5, 6% use daily or almost daily. To me, it's just so important to get a sense of, what is it that people enjoy about their use, because how much of that is truly coming from the substance versus something else. I was trained by Dr. Alan Marlatt at the University of Washington, a psychologist who contributed immeasurably to the brief intervention field for college students, but also to research using the balanced placebo design. He would routinely ask students, and you can do the same with the students or clients or patients you're working with, what are ways alcohol affects you in a good way socially? They'll tell you, I'm more funny, I'm less shy, I'm more confident, I'm more outgoing, I'm more social. Some people say better dancer, right? Then they see the video and they're like, that is not true. How do I delete this? We ask people, what are ways alcohol affects you in not so good ways in social situations? Here people say, I say things I regret, I do things I regret, I get angry, I get aggressive. When we ask, have you ever had alcohol do different things for you at different times? People always say yes to this. And that should seem really weird. But you can see all in one weekend. Some on Fridays, the life of the party. Saturday, maybe they got some bad news, and now they drink the same number of drinks. They even drink the same type of alcohol, but now they're drinking and getting really down and giving really long philosophical speeches about love to people. Dr. Marlatt said these are expectancies. When people say tequila, ooh, that makes me crazy. That's an expectancy. There's no, in quotes, crazy ingredient in tequila. When someone says that person's cute, I wish I could talk to them, but I'm really shy. If I drink 2 more than I can, that's an expectancy. And he said, we can test this. Dr. Marlatt was credited with developing the balanced placebo design, where he introduced the right side of a traditional placebo study. He felt very, very strongly that the research needed to generalize to the outside world. So to this day, in Guthrie Hall, our psych department at UW, room 242, from the outside it looks like a regular classroom. On the inside, Alan built a bar. It's called the Bar Lab, the Behavioral Alcohol Research Laboratory. The Bar Lab looks like a legitimate bar, but it is very much a laboratory. The mirror, there's a room behind that mirror so we can comfortably watch what's going on. The Dos Equis sign above the mirror is the Dos Equis camera. There's mics hidden in the ceiling. He would recruit college students, 21 and older, who did drink, who were asked to be in a study where we saw how people interact in social situations. So they all do drink, they're all over 21, and they sign a consent form that says, if you give me alcohol, I give you permission to do this. He would randomly assign people to bar lab conditions and run this study. In the upper left-hand corner, people were told they were getting alcohol, and they got it. They were asked to drink as they normally would for about the course of an hour, and they were either given beer or vodka and tonic. What do you see here? Nothing magical happens. It looks like a bunch of college students drinking. The volume of the group increases, people interact a lot more, but you need this group for comparison's sake. Clear all them out, bring in a different group, and we tell them, we're going to give you no alcohol, and in fact, they get none. They're told that they can drink tonic water with or without a lime wedge, depending if we had money or not. state school, or they could get non-alcoholic beer. What did we give them? Tonic water or non-alcoholic beer. What did you see here? Also not different than what you'd expect to see. Much quieter group, way less interaction. At best, it looks like a bunch of undergraduates who don't know each other who are asked to hang out and drink water together for an hour. Where you see the really cool stuff happen is the lower left-hand corner. We tell people they're going to get alcohol, they get alcohol-free drinks. The vodka and tonic they get is tonic water, a lot of lime in it, vodka around the rim of the glass. The beer they get is a blend of 4 different types of non-alcoholic beers. They're told they're getting alcohol. They're getting alcohol-free drinks. If alcohol makes us more social, this should be a very quiet group. But if it's the expectancy, this group's going to look just like the upper left-hand corner. And that's precisely what happens. By the 20-minute mark, coders trying to tell the difference between this group and this group can't tell the difference between these two groups. The volume of the group is increased. People are interacting a lot more. People are shoving tables together and playing drinking games with water. By the 40-minute mark, that's where you see the amazing stuff happen. Someone usually surfaces as kind of the stand-up comedian of the group. Someone usually surfaces as kind of the loud ringleader of the group. Top interpersonal behavior we see, flirting. And really schmoozy stuff too. We see people walking up to people going, so what are you doing after the experiment? And hitting on people. We're behind the mirror going, good line there, friend. We've had people not only play drinking games, we've even had people push tables to the side and dance. End of the hour, lights going bright, stereo goes off, and we let people know none of the beverages you've consumed contained any alcohol. The upper right-hand corner, they're told they're getting no alcohol, but they're actually getting it. Here, dosing is important. We knew everyone's sex assigned at birth. We knew everyone's weight. We knew everyone was going to be drinking for an hour. Dr. Marlatt did a study to find out how many parts vodka you have to add to how many parts tonic water. Put a lot of lime in there, have people not be able to tell there's alcohol in the drink. Once that concoction was achieved, each person was given a drink that, based on their sex and weight, would get them to a blood alcohol level of 0.06%. That's a big dose. They're told they're getting no alcohol, but they're actually getting it. This is a way less entertaining group to watch, but it's almost more impressive because the conviction with which people say, when I drink, all this great stuff happens, they got the alcohol, none of that stuff happened. 20-minute mark, everyone's sitting around going, when's this dumb study going to get done? Looking pretty bored. By the 40-minute mark, the physical effects of alcohol are kicking in, but people blame it on other things. They get tired, they blame it on a long day of school. They flush, they blame it on the temperature of the room. They get clumsy and they're like, sorry, clumsy. End of the hour, lights go on bright, stereo goes off. We say, surprise, you all did get alcohol. Everyone blows a breathalyzer to verify this. If on any given night, a person you're working with says, I really don't want to drink, or if they say, I'm choosing to not drink, period, they will likely hear from their friends, you should drink. You'll be more funny. You'll be more social. For real? Not according to a single published study ever. Alcohol does a lot of stuff, but the social and interpersonal things are more due to our beliefs and expectancies than what's coming from the cup, drink, can, or bottle in our hand. Guess what one of the biggest predictors of drinking heavily, at least among college students, is? Having a high number of positive outcome expectancies. People's list of answers to that question about the good things for them socially is going to go a long way to getting a sense of how likely is it this person's going to drink and even drink heavily. And finally, if a barrier to making a change in their drinking is, what if I cut down or stop drinking and I miss out on all the good social stuff? It wasn't coming from the alcohol to start with. Researchers said, could we possibly ever do this with cannabis? Jane Metrick, a former UW student who's now at Brown University, showed that you could with the 2x2 balanced placebo design. But there were a lot of methodological challenges. So people said, well, what if we just do a placebo challenge? Laughlin and colleagues recruited people who use cannabis at least once per month up to multiple times per day. As it turned out, all but 2 of their participants used at least once per week. They all signed a consent form that said, if I'm given cannabis, I give permission for this. They asked people to abstain 8 hours before they got there. They were told, depending on which condition you're in, you're going to be here up to 6 hours. And there's going to be 3 conditions. None of that was true. It was deception. They told people you were going to be in a no-dose room, a low THC room, or a high THC room. People were put in cubicles and had to rate music and comedy clips, colored designs, and compute math problems for an hour, which sounds like a delightful way to spend an hour. The experimenters would walk in and say, let's find out what condition you're in. And they'd open up the envelope and say, you're in the high THC condition. Everyone applauded. They said, we're going to give you a lollipop. It's an edible. Be careful. This is strong stuff. What did they give them? Hemp pops, made with hemp seed oil, no active elements of THC or CBD, glucose syrup, citric acid, sugar, natural flavors, and colors number 2 and number 5, which are the two most delicious colors. They said, we want you to finish this completely and then rate your mood, even rate how high you feel. They found a statistically significant decrease in negative mood, even though people got nothing at all. And there was a statistically significant increase in people reporting that they felt high with a lollipop. So you want to listen to one of the big predictors of use of both alcohol and cannabis is, do people see these positive things that come from use that may not actually be coming from the substance itself? I hope you can see why I chose the title Wishful Drinking. It certainly can even apply to cannabis use. When we look at the overlap on substance use and things like suicide risk, these are data way deep into the National Survey on Drug Use and Health. By no means is this causal, but this is among people 18 and older in the United States. You can see in this purple bar, past year alcohol use disorder, in the yellow bar, people with no past year substance use disorder. Serious thoughts of suicide, almost 4 times greater. Making a suicide plan, almost 5 times greater. Attempting suicide, almost 6 times greater. So if you're screening for alcohol use disorder, or if someone's on your radar is struggling with their substance use, we also want to be mindful of assessing things like thoughts of suicide. Michael Hufford, in an amazing overview about proximal and distal risk factors, cited research outside the US that we probably couldn't do today that showed that consuming over 10 standard drinks increases the risk for suicide attempts 90 times in comparison to abstinence. If you're thinking to yourself, didn't we just see a stat about 10 standard drinks? Yes, we did. That high intensity drinking, almost 5% of college students endorsed that at least once in the past 2 weeks. So when someone reports that they drink, we certainly want to ask how much, and we want to define what a standard drink is. And listen to their motives. One of the other things they found is that those that drank that heavily just now and then were at greater risk than those that do it routinely or habitually. One of the big things Hufford points out as a proximal risk factor is when there's alcohol intoxication and constricted thinking. A classic in this field, Alcohol Myopia by Steele and Josephs, explain what happens when we drink and when our decision making goes down. We know in our field that when people get to 0.06% or higher, that's when decision making goes down. You'll often hear people say, well, my inhibitions get lowered, but I don't think they know what that means. Here's what Steele and Joseph thinks it means through the context of alcohol myopia. They said if you're drinking, there are 2 types of cues in your world. Impelling cues that tell you, yes, I want to do this. And inhibiting cues that tell you, well, and here's why I probably shouldn't. So impelling cues could include, this is an epic party, or the person I'm talking to is really cute or really funny, or these drinks are delicious, I kind of want more. Inhibiting cues could include, look at all the phones that are out and pointed at me. Like whatever I'm doing, this is getting shared or recorded. Or I have a test tomorrow, or I got to be up early tomorrow. Steele and Joseph showed that the more and more we drink, the more alcohol impairs how we process information, and it narrows our attention to the most salient internal, what we're feeling, and environmental, what's around us, cues. Of these 2 types of cues, what tends to be the most salient? 1,000,000%, the impelling cues. That's what it means for our inhibitions to go down. People use that phrase all the time. I don't think they know what it means. Yeah, I was out drinking last night and my inhibitions lowered. What's your understanding of how that works? The inhibitions lower. Right, but what does that mean? It means this. Those inhibiting cues are there. The more and more we drink, the less and less we pay attention to them. Someone who's had nothing to drink says, I would never drink and drive. When you ask them why, all the inhibiting cues are there. I could kill someone. I could lose my license. I could wind up in jail. Everything I've worked so hard for could be gone like this. If they're above 0.06%, it's late, they're cold, they're tired, and they just want to get home. What's the impelling cue? I want to get out of here. There's my keys. Look, there's my car. The inhibiting cues are still there. They've probably been added to. I'm not walking so well, and at least 3 of my friends have tried to get my keys from me. But they act on the impelling cues at the expense of the inhibiting. If you look at suicide risk, someone who has the fleeting thought, what if I killed myself? They're flooded with all of the inhibiting cues. If someone's been drinking and they have that thought, what if I ended my life? What's the impelling cue? I hurt. I don't want to feel what I'm feeling right now. We see such a scary overrepresentation of alcohol on board during suicide attempts, but even during self-injury, things like cutting without the intent of ending one's life. Hufford explained, citing myopia, that the immediate and usual painful aspects of experience take on disproportionate weight in the delicate balance between choosing life over death among those contemplating suicide. And that alcohol intoxication acts to interrupt inhibition conflict through this myopia, leading to more excessive responses that would have occurred while sober. Lori Davidson, in her work with the Suicide Prevention Resource Center, oversaw a foundational paper that looked at, on college campuses, what comes first. Is it that people get depressed and they drink to, unquote, self-medicate, or that enough unwanted things happen while drinking? I went out instead of studying for that test. I failed the test. I'm going to lose my financial aid. I shared something that wasn't mine to share. My friends want nothing to do with me anymore. Like they don't trust me. That they start to feel unwanted mood or affect. They acknowledge that both pathways were possible, but they said the latter seems to be the most dominant. It's things happen because of decisions people make while intoxicated that come with that depressed mood and those affect related strings attached. Lori said, given those findings, if you want to be an organization that does good suicide prevention, do good alcohol prevention, because alcohol prevention is suicide prevention. I think that's so powerful. I asked her for permission to quote her. She said, of course. What we do about alcohol use pays dividends in so many other domains. When we look at cannabis, in my eyes, Dr. Wayne Hall at the University of Queensland is planet Earth's single biggest expert on cannabis. And I had the honor of moderating a webinar for our college coalition that Dr. Hall did. His work with his colleague Louise Degenhart got a lot of attention, highlighting the importance of doing everything we can to delay the initiation of cannabis use among kids. It's not a good thing, and the science backs that up if people are using at a young age. Those that use cannabis 10 or more times by age 18 were 2 to 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with schizophrenia. They concluded 13% of schizophrenia could go away if cannabis use was prevented. When I moderated that webinar with him, I asked him if we could do one thing in Washington State after legalization, what should we do? And he said without hesitating, I would screen in your health and counseling settings for cannabis use disorder. Not expecting that answer, I asked him, what makes you say that? He said, we don't know what comes first, and we don't know what drives what. It's not causal, but we see a very scary three-way relationship between cannabis use disorder, depression, and suicide that is so strong that if someone seeking help for their depression flags as being at risk for cannabis use disorder, this person poses a suicide risk that we cannot explain. I remember saying to him, I had no idea, and I'm stunned by that. And he said, well, look at your own country's data. So I did, because I really wanted him to like me. And this, you remember what the relationship looked like for alcohol. It's even more pronounced for cannabis. Again, this is not causal, but people with 18 and older with a past year cannabis use disorder, 6 times greater endorsement of serious thoughts of suicide, 7.5 times greater likelihood of making a suicide plan, over 8 times more likelihood of endorsing having made a suicide attempt. What we do about substance use, I'll say it again, will pay dividends in so many other domains. When you look at motives for use that could exacerbate or cause the very thing someone's seeing you for, one of the things we often consider is the relationship of substance use to sleep quality and how that affects people on subsequent days. I love this article by Roars and Roth for so many reasons. It's aged really well. Plus, if you look at the reference section or the citation, it's only 9 pages long, which is one of my criteria for a good article. I always hate when people send me articles that are 50 pages long and they're like, Jason, you should read this. I'm like, you should read this. But Roars and Roth explain that if you want to have a perfect night's sleep, this is an artist's dramatization of sleep, of course. But if you want to have a perfect night's sleep, time in REM should get longer, longer, longer. Time in deep should get less and less and less. It's not that more REM is better. It's that this pattern is what we're looking for. We know that there are a handful of people that actually will report and endorse using alcohol as a sleep aid. One study showed 12%. A study by Scott Krappensberger, who is an affiliate faculty with us at UW, showed even as high as 20% cite using substances intentionally as a sleep aid. There's a big difference between onset of sleep and what happens once we're asleep. If people drink at night, they will fall asleep faster in general because alcohol is a depressant and depresses or slows down the central nervous system. But you can ask the person you're working with, on nights where you've been drinking, what do you notice about your sleep? Tell me about your dreaming. They're going to say, whoa, how did you know? I don't dream at all. Or if I do dream, it's crazy vividly right before I wake up. Here's why. go to bed with a positive blood alcohol level and stay at a positive for the whole night, the brain waves needed to kick into REM sleep don't happen. That will account for someone's subjective sense that they didn't dream. It's because they genuinely didn't enter REM sleep. If you're at a positive blood alcohol, positive, you hit a zero, people tend to wake up prematurely, abruptly, and even with some anxiety. If they go back to sleep, they go through an acute REM rebound, which is associated with those vivid, weird dreams right before waking up. What's the impact of a night of REM-deprived sleep? We see a significant increase the next day in daytime sleepiness, anxiety. The brutal irony is if someone says that's why I drink is to help me unwind, help me relax, you can actually cause problems with anxiety the next day. Increase in irritability, increase in physical jumpiness. This is all cumulative. If they drink the next night, all of this worsens. If they take a night off, the body plays catch up. I can't graphically show you insomnia any better than right there. A person slams so fast into into deep sleep and then immediately into REM, that rapid cycling leads to difficulty both falling and staying asleep. Once they get to sleep, too much time in REM, not enough time in the other stages of sleep, vivid, often weird dreams, increase the next day in fatigue. Think of how many different diagnoses include the words you see on your screen right now. And what the science shows is if people choose to not drink, they're going to see their sleep quality improve. They're going to see the words you see on your screen improve, if not go away. Angarita and colleagues in 2016 were able to clearly document what happens with cannabis. A lot of times, when you ask people who use cannabis at night what they notice, they say two things. I sleep hard. I sleep and I mean it. And I don't dream. What they're calling sleeping hard is that stage 4 or deep sleep gets extended. Onset is more immediate with a sedative, sedating, hypnotic, sleep-inducing substance. But stage 4 deep sleep gets extended, REM is deprived. Just like with alcohol, we see increases the next day in sleepiness, anxiety, irritability, and jumpiness. Just like with alcohol, these effects are additive or cumulative. And just like with alcohol, if someone takes a night off, they go through REM rebound the next day, which is associated with an increase in fatigue. I think that the most well-established finding we have, especially with the age group I work with, is the impact of cannabis on attention, concentration, and memory. It's gotten very hard to diagnose ADHD if people are using cannabis. The part of the brain that, among other things, affects attention, concentration, and memory is the hippocampus. Truly, long story short, after cannabis use, the neurons in the hippocampus get suppressed. They fire, but they fire at a rate that is lower and slower than they could or should be firing. Harrison Pope is a Harvard researcher who in the 90s showed that a full day after cannabis use, you see decreases in these abilities in a sample of college students who use cannabis. And the more often students use, the more pronounced these decreases seem to be. There's almost this additive or cumulative effect. People said, how do you know that's causal? What if people who struggle with attention are attracted to using cannabis? And he said, ethically, we can test that. We can't take people who don't use and make them start to induce cognitive impacts. That's unethical. But what if we have people that use every day and we have them quit and we follow them over time? If we follow them over time and their cognitive abilities stay the same, maybe they were there to start with. But if we follow them as they abstain and their cognitive abilities improve, that, my friends, is causal. It takes 4 weeks, 28 days, but 28 days after stopping daily use, this all goes away. A sample of 15 to 19-year-olds in California who on average used every other day. Verbal learning takes 2 weeks of abstinence to match that of people that don't use. Verbal working memory takes 3 weeks of abstinence. Attention takes the full 4 weeks. This has been replicated up until just even the past couple months. So think about what this means. If someone has ADHD, cannabis is not a good fit. We know of no substance more associated with causing attention decreases, let alone worsening existing ones. Sometimes people say, well, I think you're wrong, because if I don't use, I can't sit still. That's withdrawal, and I'm going to show you that in just a bit. If someone says, yeah, I'm pretty sure I have ADHD, can I have something prescribed to me? And they're using cannabis, how can we pretend to diagnose if they do or don't if they're using a substance that causes attention decreases? Often the advice given to clinicians is if someone's truly trying to decide, do I have an underlying attention issue and they're using cannabis, we can encourage them to abstain for a month to see if we can disentangle what could truly be an underlying attention issue versus the side effect of their cannabis use. And can I tell you, this all overlaps, even with things like academic success. I don't want to feel like I'm, in quotes, picking on cannabis, but I just want to let you all know, particularly relevant to the age group we all work with. When you look at what researchers consider high potency cannabis, it's anything over 10% THC. And why that's so noteworthy is that 97% of Washington's retail market is above that threshold. I'm going to predict that you hear the same thing from the people you work with that I hear from college students. It's natural, it's just weed, it's safer than alcohol. This came out in January. Smokable bud or flower, we used to say that the typical range sold in Washington was 20 to 30%. Now we're just saying it's anything under 35%. None of that occurs in nature. That takes intentional breeding of created high potency strains. Vape liquids, they can be even higher, but the typical range is up to 85%. Wax, shatter, concentrates, what people use for dabbing. We used to say 60 to 90% when this document came out in January. They bumped up that lower bound to 70 to 90% THC. In the 70s, it was 1.5% THC. In the 80s, 2 to 3% THC. In the 90s, 4, 5, 6% THC. This is a different animal. And with those concentrates, not only does that not occur in nature, that's not even the plant anymore. That's the sticky, gooey substance that has very little to do with cannabis flower. Marta DeForti and her team across 11 cities in Europe and Brazil showed that the more often people use cannabis over 10% THC, the greater the onset of psychotic disorder. Those using daily products over 10%, their odds of developing a a psychotic disorder go up 4.8 to 5.8 times compared to people who don't use at all. Lindsay Hines followed people throughout adolescence up to the age of 24, showed the more often people used, the greater risk of addiction and more generalized anxiety disorder. In Canada, they said, look, it's legal. People need to know that for concentrates and extracts, more problematic cannabis use, more addiction, cannabis use disorder, and more mental health disorders. Finally, I'm a state employee. We're reminded, especially at election season, it's a state ethics violation if we come out for or against a candidate or an initiative. So we're often very quiet and speak when spoken to. We got spoken to. End of 2019, start of 2020. The state said something feels different with these high potency products. They invited researchers from both the University of Washington and Washington State University to review the literature and see, can we generate a consensus statement? I was honored to be one of the researchers they invited. I was frankly stunned at how quickly we came up with a consensus statement. You can go to this link that'll be in the handouts that I sent, and you can download our full 20-page report. If you don't have time to read 20 pages, I'm with you. We have a 2-page Cliff Notes version. Cliff was my favorite author when I was younger, so shout out to Cliff. We even have slides you can download. But what we concluded is these high potency products are no joke, especially before the age of 25. Adolescents, teenagers, young adults, college students, the more often they use these products, the more they're experiencing a range of unwanted effects, including developing a cannabis use disorder. And I want to say just one thing before then I get us over the finish line. I hope none of you mishear me. If you have a friend, family member, or a loved one with a gravely disabling or potentially fatal condition that's had medical cannabis recommended and they're using as recommended, that's not who I'm talking about. I really worry about the very depressed 18-year-old that says, I'm not going to go to counseling. No, I'm not going to try that medication. I'm going to use cannabis instead. And this is why. I had the honor of presenting in Canada the week that they legalized nationwide for non-medical purposes. And what was unbelievable is as they were opening the floodgates on access to non-medical cannabis, the medical folks were saying we've got to slow down. Allen and colleagues published this unbelievable article where they said, we're going to make simplified guidelines for prescribing medical cannabinoids. We want to take into account, do the benefits of the medication outweigh the side effects, consequences, and harms? What's the addiction potential? Has it been researched in randomized controlled trials against a placebo? Are there effective therapies or treatments out there? They said, if someone says, can I get medical cannabis? If that's the issue. If yes, move to the next square. Is it for neuropathic pain, palliative and end-of-life pain, chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting, or spasticity due to multiple sclerosis or spinal cord injury? If no, we're done. We're not giving it for anxiety, for sleep, for headaches, for depression. How come? If there are any benefits, they're so outnumbered by the well-documented risks, consequences, harms, and side effects. It's a very addictive substance. The science for those issues is not there. And we have treatments and therapies that work. Only if yes, if people tried traditional therapies or treatments first. If no, go back to the drawing board. If yes, you can consider a medical cannabinoid as an adjunct, but notice that they say we recommend against smoking as a method of use. If at this point in the presentation you're thinking to yourself, wow, this Jason Kilmer has some strong stylus skills, you would be right. The first time my stylus shot out of my computer, I was like, oh no, I broke my computer. My friend said, that's a stylus. I said, I don't know what that is. She said, Jason, you have a touch screen. You can draw on your computer. So now I just can't be stopped. So on top of all these amazing special effects, to celebrate the start of fall, I made this nature scene for everybody. I really need a hobby. I made these. These are adorable. And then I made a Bigfoot on his way to Ann Arbor to beat Michigan this weekend. Go Ducks. Uh, some people go, what about CBD? That works, doesn't it? This is, again, the importance of looking at placebo. An amazing study by Arndt and DeWitt had people be their own control group. They signed a consent form and said, I agree to take something that could include CBD. It was a double-blind experiment, meaning they eliminated expectancies. The four conditions were placebo, sugar, 300, 600, and a stunning 900 milligrams of CBD taken orally. People would take the dose, and then they would go through a task that induced unwanted mood or affect. When people didn't know what they were taking, what did CBD do? Nothing at all. I hope none of you mishear me. I'm not saying CBD does nothing, period. Certainly, Allen and colleagues said there were 4 domains in which medical cannabinoids could be indicated. But CBD does not produce anxiolytic, anxiety-reducing-like effects in healthy human subjects. If people are dealing with anxiety, we want to get them connected with services that work, rather than products that make the claim of effectiveness where the science isn't there. Final 2 things before we get over the finish line. Gilman and colleagues did the study we've all been waiting for. You don't need a medical card in Washington if you're over 21 and have cash to go into a retail store. But if you have a medical card, there are tax exemptions, fee breaks, it's cheaper. People said, can I get a medical marijuana card? And if they were eligible, she randomly assigned them to be in a 12-week waitlist control group or to get it immediately. Probably not surprisingly, the group that got the card immediately increased their frequency of use compared to the control group. But guess what else increased? They got addicted, especially if they were using for depression or anxiety. Cannabis use disorder went up and up and up. If a picture's worth 1,000 words, this one feels like it speaks volumes. What got worse? Cannabis use disorder symptoms. What got better? People said, well, I can fall asleep faster now. We talked about that. Onset of sleep improves. Quality of sleep, though, does get affected adversely. But look at what didn't change. Quoting verbatim, there were no observed benefits of obtaining a medical marijuana card for pain, anxiety, or depressive symptoms. Going back to this concept of wishful drinking, certainly you can substitute whatever it is people are wishing for. But if people say, I really want my blank to get better, it's getting people connected with services that work. The treatments we have for anxiety, for depression, for pain, almost need a hype person to talk about how effective they are, the way that advertisements and claims about medical cannabis might be made. And lastly, I do worry about how many people say, well, marijuana helps my blank, and what they're describing is being addicted. Dr. Christine Lee asked incoming students, the article said, to a large Northwest university, it was us. Tell us why you use cannabis. And they said things like, I like getting high, I like the feeling, gives me something to do with my friends, helps when I'm bored, makes things more fun, music sounds better, it's cool, helps me celebrate. But they also said it helps me relax, helps me sleep, lets me cope when I'm depressed, it relieves stress, helps when my appetite sucks, reduces anxiety, alleviates physical pain, helps when I have a headache. One of the criteria for cannabis use disorder is withdrawal. When you look at the criteria for withdrawal, what do they include? Keeping this list in mind, it's the same list. Anxiety, sleep difficulty, decreased appetite, depressed mood, and headaches. If someone says, you're wrong, it helps my anxiety, because when I don't use, I get anxious. And when I resume using, my anxiety goes away. That's because they're making withdrawal symptoms stop. And there's a patient education opportunity there. I mentioned that some people with ADHD say, if I don't use, I can't sit still. Please look at criteria number 5, restlessness. I didn't circle it because it wasn't on this slide. But if someone says, I feel like it helps my ADHD because if I don't use, I can't sit still, that's withdrawal. So in wrapping up, 5 suggestions you can do with as you wish. Number 1, do consider screening, brief intervention, and or referral to treatment when indicated. We could do a full hour on screening alone, and obviously I don't have the chance to do that. There are screening measures that certainly get recommended, but that might vary based on the age group you work with most closely. So I initially had recommendations that unfortunately were best for the age group I work with. I didn't know if they'd be as effective across the board, but even asking people about their use is a foot in the door. People aren't often expecting, especially if they're under 21, to be asked, um, do you drink? Do you use or have you used cannabis? The important thing to know is screening is no matter what people come in for, it's a chance to just find out, is there worth something exploring with the person? Brief interventions so often involve Miller and Rolnick's motivational interviewing, which we do so much work around, to prompt contemplation of or commitment to change. And referral to treatment is for those that maybe need more than a brief intervention. Number two, do be aware of word choice when screening or discussing substance use. If you ask someone, do you smoke marijuana? A person who uses edibles every day can look you in the eye and say, nope, and they're not lying, but we miss their daily use. So asking, do you use or have you used? I used to work in the student affairs office at UW where we screened about cannabis use. We didn't realize how many really smart UW students don't know what cannabis is. We needed to define that. We would meet with students that said no to cannabis use, but with nothing to hide would tell us that they use weed every day. At the end of the day, if someone says, I use weed, use the word they use. We're not going to say, I'm sorry, could you please call it this? But if you screen for cannabis, you can say, and when I say cannabis, I mean marijuana, weed, gummies, whatever seems to fit the age group you work with. If it's a yes, no, you can ask, do you use or have you used cannabis? If they say no, you're done. If yes, what does your use look like? Miller and Rolex motivational interviewing talks so much about being non-judgmental, non-confrontational, avoiding labels, and using open-ended questions where we can. If I want to get someone thinking about harms or consequences, I'm not going to call it that. I'm going to start by asking them, what are the good things about drinking for you? What are the good things about using weed for you? Let them answer that. Then I'm going to ask, what are the not so good things? I run the mandated student groups at the University of Washington for students that have violated our campus drug policy for cannabis in a state that's had legal weed for almost 13 years. When I ask a group of 4 to 8 undergrads, what are the not so good things about marijuana for you? How long a list do I get from them? I'm much more familiar with Zoom than I am on WebEx, and I actually don't even want to touch anything, so I don't even know if there is a chat to use. But usually when I have people guess in the chat, they guess like one. I got to meet with this guy. 2, 3, 4. The peak I think I usually see is 7 or 8. Just to make the point, 2 back-to-back groups. I eliminated the duplicates. There's my list. I get surprised when I hear people say you can't talk to 18 to 22-year-olds about cannabis because they don't see any negative consequences. That's not true. It's what we call them. If I start those workshops and say, no, you all got in trouble, sorry about that, I'll get us out of here early today. What problems have you had with using marijuana? How many problems? You got a problem. What negative consequences have you had literally coming to this meeting? What are the good things? What are the not so good things? You're going to have a very different conversation. Number 3, if the age group you work with, it's appropriate to do something that focuses on reducing harm, do be aware of lower risk guidelines that might suggest outright abstinence, depending on either the context of mental health or a person's situation. This is planet Earth's who's who of cannabis experts. There's Dr. Hall, who I mentioned earlier, Dr. Vandenbrink from the Netherlands. Notice the title. It doesn't say low risk guidelines, it says lower risk guidelines. How come? They say if you look at the science, there's no universally safe level of cannabis use. The only reliable way to avoid any risk of harm is to abstain. If people make the choice to use low potency products where possible. They're hard to find, but they're out there. Realize there's no categorically safe route of use, but that without question, smoking is the most unhealthy. Keep use occasional, a day or 2 a week, weekend only. If people notice the cognitive stuff, stop. If stopping is not realistic, substantially reduce frequency and potency. We live in a state in which drug driving deaths outnumber drunk driving deaths. People don't drink and drive. We have a lot more work to do on when you hear people say things like, I drive better when I'm high. They really, really don't. People need to wait 6 to 8 hours after inhaling, 8 to 12 hours after use of edibles. If people are intending to get pregnant, or if they are pregnant or nursing, the only recommendation based on the current science is abstinence. And there are some people that might want to avoid using completely or seriously adjust their use. Who's that? People with a first-degree family history of or who are actively dealing with depression, an active psychotic disorder, mood disorder, or substance use disorder. Number 4, parents, caregivers, and guardians can be partners in prevention. My friend Annie Fairley, when she was at Rhode Island, collected data during the summer before students started college, end of their first year, end of their second year. She wanted to predict, in quotes, binge drinking, 5 drinks in a row or more for males, 4 drinks in a row or more for females. As a function of social modeling, number of close friends who drink heavily, perceived friend approval of drinking and getting drunk, and parental permissiveness. Data never turn out this perfectly, but look at this graph. Top line, high social modeling, high parental permissiveness. Next line down, high social modeling, low parental permissiveness. Messaging from caregivers, guardians, and parents can alter the trajectory of a student who goes to a high-risk friend group, a high-risk setting like a fraternity or sorority, or even a campus with a reputation for partying. Next line down, low social modeling, high permissiveness. Next line down, low social modeling, low permissiveness. Even among a low peer influence, messaging from parents continues to matter. Our state's Healthy Youth Survey. Hey kids, sophomores in high school, do you think your parents think it's wrong for you to use marijuana or not wrong? When kids say, I think my parents would think it's wrong, 13% have used in the past 30 days. When kids say, my parents wouldn't care, 59% have used. In our young adult health survey, this is 10 cohorts of 18 to 25-year-olds. In yellow, it's a decreasing trend. In blue, it's an increasing trend. I'll just draw your attention. Second blue from the bottom. Getting it from parents with their parents' permission became the third most common source of cannabis for 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. That persisted into year 11. We'll see what the year 12 data show. I hear way too many parents say things like, I used when I was younger and I turned out fine. They used different stuff. So we have so many amazing resources in Washington. Start Talking Now was just relaunched, available in 38 languages at starttalkingnow.org. I have fallen in love with refusalskills.org, an amazing tool developed by Mike Graham Squire and his team at Neighborhood House. All of these will be in the handouts. Dr. Walker here was, who I saw at the beginning, was influential in writing the initial guide for what parents need to know. And certainly there have been continued updates to learn about cannabiswa.org, but at the parent section, there are so many tools and resources for parents. You can also go to collegeparentsmatter.org out of Maryland. Parents are super influential. You saw my Duran Venn diagram at the beginning. I was in high school from 1983 to 1987. So first, I have amazing taste in music. And second, I love all references to 80s music. I'm married to a now retired 6th grade teacher who taught 6th grade for 30 years. And she was grading a paper near the end of her career and showed it to me. And I'm like, can I please take a picture of this? Because I think it shows how truly influential parents are. Either this kid's hilarious, or there's a slight chance that their parents, caregivers, or guardians who were also children of the 80s may have broken their child. The assignment was, here's a blank map of the world. Please label every continent and every ocean. And one of the kids in her class labeled Africa as Africa by Toto, which is, of course, the song about blessing the rains down in Africa by the band that also sings the song Rosanna. And with that, I'm just going to end by saying, realize that when you address substance use, you address mental health and vice versa. I have cited a lot of academic research. I'm going to end citing a non-academic reference. It's turning 100 years old next year, and it's from one of my favorite books as a kid, Winnie the Pooh. When you wake up in the morning, Pooh, said Piglet at last, what's the first thing you say to yourself? What's for breakfast, said Pooh. What do you say, Piglet? I say, I wonder what's going to happen exciting today, said Piglet. Pooh nodded thoughtfully. It's the same thing, he said. When someone says to you, shouldn't you be addressing this kid's mental health? Why are you talking about their vaping? It's the same thing. When someone says, don't we need to be talking about student well-being and success? Why are you talking about their drinking? Because it's the same thing. My goal was to leave 5 to 10 minutes for questions. I'm delighted to say I've left 5 to 10 minutes for questions. Thank you all from the bottom of my heart for doing what you do to support people in Washington State. Thank you all for your interest in this topic. I genuinely hope this met people's needs and interests. And with that, I will stop talking, tag back over to the team in the room, and see what questions or opportunity there is for discussion. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so we have about 5 minutes for questions.
I
We'll
can
start
tell
with
you
chat.
online, we had one comment from Courtney. Dr. Kilmer, your humor and delivery made this one of the most enjoyable and informative grand rounds I've attended. Thank you. And I think folks will concur.
Goosebumps. Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. I appreciate that. Oh, now I see where the chat is. I'd like to give a shout out to the one person who wrote "Go Dogs." Thank you. Go Dogs. I got all my purple packed for when we drive through Indiana tomorrow.
All right, we have a question in the audience.
Thank you so much. This is Molly Grow, and my husband Joel Grow, who I think you know, says hi from Chatland. I said, "Oh my gosh, Jason Kilmer is giving grand rounds today."
We love Joel.
Yeah, also trained
You're
with
like
Alan Marlatt at the UW, I so appreciate this talk and all of these really important, critical data and messages that you shared with us today. It is troubling as a general pediatrician, I will admit, and I am curious where we are with the possibility of trying to do some amount of regulation around the degree of high potency products. Like, that's clearly a massive change, and that is really leading to a lot of the high risk kind of situations you're describing. And is there receptivity for that within our state with data that you all are providing to state leaders, and where are we with that?
That same link, first of all, please say hi to Joel on behalf of all of us. And secondly, that same link where we did the consensus statement with UW and WSU researchers, that might be third down on the page. Number one on the page is the report they handed over to state legislators. So Bia Carlini oversaw at ADAI, oversaw an interview of partners and collaborators across the board, law enforcement, prevention specialists, cannabis retail store owners, you name it, and got a sense of, what do you think? Like, now that we're this many years into it, what can we do? And it's the summary of what's been handed over to the state legislature. Certainly, I can't speculate on what they're going to do from a legislation standpoint. And certainly, our colleagues at the Liquor and Cannabis Board are providing updates around public health whenever they can. But the single best resource to answer that question would be that tool. I might, when I send the handouts, actually just include a link to that exact report so you can see how to access that.
I have a question, Yolanda, related to screening and thinking about all of us in subspecialty care and in primary care. You mentioned just asking the question, but any like tips or tricks for people who maybe don't spend a lot of time in the realm of working with teens on how to open the door? You kind of gave an example, some examples, but and how do you
was part of a study with a colleague at Syracuse where we asked people, how much do you drink in a typical week? Walk me through each day. And then we acted like we made a mistake, and we're like, I totally forgot to tell you what a standard drink is. A standard drink is this, and this. Could you please do it one more time? The overwhelming majority increased their estimate once we defined standard drink. So if you ask people, how many drinks do you have? They're going to count containers. They're not going to count standard drinks. So I think you do want to do what you can to go that route. I can share my screen and show you. And I'll add these to the handouts I send. I saw one question about if you can get the handouts. Absolutely. So I'll share my screen again. So the Alcohol Use Disorders Identification Test, the audit, is from the World Health Organization. And it even comes with a guide for providers, including what you do based on a person's score in different ranges. The audit is 10 items. If you don't have time to do 10 items, there's the audit C, and the C stands for consumption. It's the 3 items most related to consumption. If you don't have time for 3 items, there's a single item from NIAAA, the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. How many times in the last year have you had 5 drinks in a row for males, 4 drinks in a row for females? The QDIT R was based on the audit, was not performing the way they wanted. They revised it, and it has performed so well that the Wash and Recovery Helpline got thumbs up from the authors to make that available to providers in Washington. My disclaimer, and the reason why I didn't include it in the presentation, is I don't think we have enough reliability and validity data to know that if you scale way down to much younger, what it means. And you all are obviously your own best experts in the age group you work with. But depending on the age group you work with, certainly if it's over the age of 18, this can be a very valuable tool, and I'll make sure sure this is in the handouts that I send to the team at Seattle Children's. It starts with a simple yes, no. Have you used any cannabis over the past 6 months? If no, you're done. If yes, there's 8 items. How to score it is second from the bottom. How to interpret it is right at the bottom. So I'll be sure to include that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Kilmer. Well, with that, we're at time, and we just want to thank you once again for this really amazing presentation. We all learned a lot, and we're excited to keep learning. Thank you.
Well, we're all in this together. I'll say what I said at the beginning. I fear the person that claims they have all the answers. I hope this was helpful. I hope this met people's needs and interests. And if I can ever be of assistance to you, know you've got a tag team partner over at the Center for the Study of Health and Risk Behaviors. So thank you, everybody.